Mother Sachi. So, of course, they had their friends, Vaishnava friends, like Gadadhar Pandit. But he decided to take sannyas so that he could get some attention, that he could get some honor, and people would listen to him. Because in those days, the sannyas was very much honored. There was a varnashram system. So he did take sannyas, and so that was so on this day. I don't know if he took sannyas on the day when it was Vishvarup Mahotsav. I don't know. But anyway, Srila Prabhupada, let's find out. I would prefer, if you don't mind, for my own instruction also, to read from the Lilamrita. To hear from.
I can get you the physical book if you like. I can get you the physical book.
Yeah, you can, but the thing is, I like to read on the phone.
Okay.
It's easier for me, but you can get the book.
No problem.
What should I look up? Vishvarup Mahotsav?
It's in the first volume, Maharaj. We took sannyas.
Yeah, it'll be in the first volume. Can you get it? And then you can give me a...
It's in my... But there's also the on the bookshelf.
What should we say? What's appropriate? Let me think.
Anything you think, Maharaj.
Papa took sannyas. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Vijana Balava Givaradhari Vijana Balava Givaradhari Yashodanandana Vajajanandana Yashodanandana Vajajanandana Yashodanandana Vajajanandana Shodanandana Vajajanandana Yashodanandana Vajajanandana Yamuna Tira Manachari Yamuna Tira Manachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Balava Givaradhari Gopijana Balava Givaradhari Yashodanandana Bhajanandana Yashodanandana Bhajanandana Yashodanandana Bhajanandana Yashodanandana Bhajanandana Yashodanandana Bhajanandana Yamuna Tera Vanayari Yamuna Tera Vanayari Yashodanandana Bhajanandana Yashodanandana Bhajanandana Yamuna Tera Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. How we go? Holy Bull, Holy Bull. Everybody out there, come on, join in, come on. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Jaya Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Where's the book? Radha Madhava Punjabi Hari. Where's the book? Leela, read it. Jaya Vishnu Paramahansa Parikaya Sosati Sisma Swami Avaishnaravindra Bhakti Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki ISKCON founder, BBT founder Srila Prabhupada Ki Jaya Vishnu Paramahansa Parikaya Sosati Sisma Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ananta Koti Vaishnavindra Ki Nama Shashila Harida Sakar Ki Jai Kapshika Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Radha Shri Vasili Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopanam Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhana Ki Jai Mathura Vrindavan Dhama Ki Navadip Mayapur Dhama Ki ISKCON Radha Govinda Shamahon Sri Paklin Dham Ki Shamahon Maya Ganga Maya Ki Shrimati Tulsi Devi Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Mahamantra Ki Jai. Chansana Book Distribution Ki Jai. Chansana Prasad Distribution Ki Jai. Chansana Cow Protection Ki Jai. Oh Premanandi. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. The day that Srila Prabhupada took sannyas Ki Jai. Shiva Swarup Mahamotsav Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srila Prabhupada Leela Amrita Ki Jai. Shri Satsvarup Das Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Gope Manandi. You found it?
Yes, Mars. So it's about 8 pages.
Yeah, I know.
You got it?
I've been on this place before.
Okay.
But it's such a wonderful story.
Starting from here.
Yeah. And so of course Prabhupada had left home already. Technically speaking, you know the Leela, it's either tea or me. And he walked out and he decided it was that she could have tea. She could keep her tea. So anyway, that's another story. One night, Abai had a striking dream. The same dream he had had several times before. During his days as a householder, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati appeared, just as Abai had known him, the tall, scholarly sannyas coming directly from the spiritual world, from Krishna's personal entourage. He called to Abai and indicated that he should follow. Repeatedly he called and motioned. He was asking Abai to take sannyas. Come, he urged, become a sannyasi. Wow, what a dream. Abai awoke in a state of wonder. He thought of this instruction as another feature of the original instructions Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had given him at their first meeting in Calcutta. The same instruction that his spiritual master had later solidified in a letter. Become an English preacher and spread Krishna consciousness throughout the Western world. Sannyas was for that end. Otherwise, would his spiritual master have asked him to accept it? Abai reasoned that his spiritual master was saying, now take sannyas and you will actually be able to accomplish this mission. Formerly, the time was not right. Abai deliberated cautiously. By accepting sannyas, a Vaishnava dedicates his body, mind and words totally to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, renouncing all other engagements. He was doing that already. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had offered sannyas to his leading disciples so that they could continue his mission. They hadn't done it. Preaching in the West had proved perilous even for the Gaudiya Mat's most recognized sannyasis. How could he, a mere householder, presume he could succeed where the others had failed? He was hesitant. The helpless, incapable feeling he had expressed in his Viraha Ashtaka was there. That was Vrindavan Bhajan. He'd written some poems. But now his spiritual master was beckoning him over all other considerations, even over natural humility. Now, although he was elderly and alone, the desire to preach, just as his spiritual master had preached, remained within him. A fierce, though sometimes quietly expressed, determination. So then there's more about sannyas now. The Vedic standard and the example set by the previous acharyas was that if one wanted to lead a preaching movement, sannyas was required. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had taken sannyas to facilitate his missionary work. Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas to further the Sankirtan movement. And like I said earlier, it was unheard of for a young man, 26 years old, to take sannyas and leave his wife and his mother unprotected. But because he wanted to preach, he did it. He swam across the Ganga and went to the ashram of Keshav Bharati Maharaj and took sannyas. I've been to that place, Katwa. We came to that place we were coming down to Mayapur from Vrindavan on a raft in the flood season. And we called in there. And there's a place where the barber, he was crying, but everyone said he must cut his long hair. And he was cursing himself. How can I cut this beautiful long hair? Anyway, it was a beautiful place. Katwa. I think it's Katwa. So Lord Chaitanya had taken sannyas to further the Sankirtan movement. Of course, Lord Chaitanya was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But when his young students had been disrespectful towards him, treating him as an ordinary man, he had taken sannyas. I mentioned that. Because the sannyas is automatically respected, Lord Chaitanya's acceptance of sannyas was a calculated tactic. As soon as he began traveling throughout India as a sannyas, he immediately attracted thousands of followers to the Sankirtan movement. Prabhupada also did this. Because he was thinking, how to get this movement started. So give young men sannyas. Although he knew they would probably fall down. Prabhupada gave an example. He said, when the sag, when the spinach is green, one should cook it. If you leave it, it'll just go sad and it won't be nice sag. So Prabhupada also used the same tactic for preaching. He was criticized for that. Knowing that many cheaters would accept the saffron dress and abuse the respect given to sannyas, Lord Chaitanya had advised against accepting sannyas in the age of Kali. He knew that cheaters in the guise of sadhus would act immorally, accumulate funds for their own sense gratification, and make many followers simply to enhance their own prestige. Fill in the missing word. Posing as swamis, they would cheat the public. Because the people in Kali were unable to follow the rules and regulations of sannyas, Lord Chaitanya had recommended that they simply chant Hare Krishna. However, if a person could actually follow the rules, especially if he had to spread the Sankirtan movement, sannyas was necessary. Abai first had to approach one of his godbrothers for permission. He decided to turn to Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha Maharaj, formerly Kunja Vihari, the leader of the Chaitanya Math in Calcutta. Abai still thought of the Chaitanya Math as the headquarters of his spiritual master's
movement.
No, beginning with M. Mission, yes. During the heated legal disputes, the Chaitanya Math had been the most prized acquisition, and since 1948 it had been under the legal ownership of Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha Maharaj. Now, although such sannyasi had his own place or places, the Chaitanya Math and Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha Maharaj legally represented the Gaudiya Math entity. Abai felt that if he were to take sannyas and go preach in America, he would give the Chaitanya Math the first opportunity to support his work. In April 1959, Abai wrote to Tirtha Maharaj inquiring about sannyas as well as about the Chaitanya Math's the Chaitanya Math's printing some of his manuscripts. You're reading? No. Okay, manuscripts. And since no one was going abroad, he volunteered to do so on behalf of the Chaitanya Math. Bhaktisiddhanta Tirtha replied that Abai should first join the Chaitanya Math. He mentioned the strife that still lingered. Quote, this is Bhakti Vilas Tirtha Maharaj's letter. Those who are acting against Chaitanya Mat, they are motivated by their individual ambitions. Anyone who was against the Chaitanya Mat, he said, was acting illogically and against the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. So according to Tirtha Maharaj, the thing for Abai to do, the thing he had neglected to do for so many years, was to join the Chaitanya Mat and act under his direction. Tirtha Maharaj mentioned several members of the Chaitanya Mat who had recently accepted the sannyas order, and he said that Abai could also become one in time. He invited Abai to come reside at the Chaitanya Mat. Quote, the houses that we have there are rooms that are airy and well lit. We will treat you exclusively. There won't be any difficulty. We will take care that no inconveniences are caused. But as for printing books, quote, we are eagerly awaiting to print the books as like Satsandava, Vedanta based on devotional service, and many other rare books by the Goswamis. First we will print them. Books written by you will be checked by the editorial staff, and if the funds can be raised, then they can be printed according to priority. The books will be printed only if they are favorable for the service of the Chaitanya Mat. Therefore, if the fund is raised, then there is plan to go abroad as well. Abai was not...
I have a question, Maharaj.
No questions now. I'm in full steam ahead now. Abai was not encouraged. The main difficulty he felt was the Chaitanya Mat's shortage of funds. Srila Prabhupada. These are Prabhupada's words. I was working with my broken typewriter. I went to our Tirtha Maharaj. You give me a room and print my books. Give me some money. I will join you. I had thought, this is Guru Maharaj's institution. He did not say no, but the printing of books was a difficult task for him. He had no money. He was hardly collecting for maintaining. Printing of books is a big job, and there is no guarantee of sale. Without printing books and going to the West, sannyas did not have any meaning for Abai. And who knew when Tirtha Maharaj would sanction his taking sannyas? There was no point in going to Calcutta just to reside in an airy, well-lit room that he had already in Vrindavan. Abai wrote back to Tirtha Maharaj mentioning his direct order from Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati to preach to the English-speaking people. He wanted to go to the West right away, and he had thought the Chaitanya Mat would welcome his offer. Both Abai and Tirtha Maharaj had their responsibilities, but perhaps they could work together to carry out the desire of their spiritual master. Abai asked Tirtha Maharaj to reconsider. On May 7th, 1959, Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj wrote back, quote, my suggestion is don't make any hasty decisions. For the time being, you stay with us and engage yourself in the service of the society, and then accept Tridanda sannyas. The purpose of accepting Tridanda is to serve the society. Yes. If that is your desire, then Sri Chaitanya Mat will decide about your going to America to preach and make all the arrangements. It can never be the principle of the society to let one act according to his individual attempt or desire. The society will decide, after consulting with the heads, what is to be done by whom. That is what I want to say. First of all, it is necessary to identify oneself with the society. In order to preach in America or in other foreign countries, it is important to have a dignified organization in the background. And secondly, it is necessary to establish oneself in India before going to preach in the foreign countries. Now it is that there are no conferences or meetings in the West as before. Communication is done through the media of television. Abai could understand the needs and priorities of the Chaitanya Math, but he could not allow them to overrule what he considered the highest mandate, preaching as Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had ordered. Abai had offered his services to the leaders of the Chaitanya Math, thinking they might also see things his way. He thought that with the world's crying need for Krishna consciousness staring them in the face, they might see that this Abai Babu was convinced and enthusiastic, and so should be sent right away with whatever he required. But they had other priorities. Abai next turned to Keshav Maharaj in Mathura, and Keshav Maharaj told Abai to take sannyas. Take sannyas immediately. After corresponding with Tirtha Maharaj, Abai had felt some uncertainty about accepting sannyas. But now that he was being encouraged so strongly, he resisted. But Keshav Maharaj was insistent. This is a quote from Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada. I was sitting alone in Vrindavan, writing. My godbrother insisted to me, Bhaktivedanta Prabhu, you must do it. Without accepting the renounced order of life, nobody can become a preacher. So he insisted. Not he insisted. Practically, my spiritual master insisted. He wanted me to become a preacher. So he forced me through this godbrother. You accept. So unwillingly, I accepted. That's the background. Amazing, no? Such a writer about this Satsvarup Das Goswami. Some people, they criticize. I can't criticize. I love the way he writes. It's so nice. And so informative. So, this is the best thing we can do. Is just here today. Keshav Gaudiya Math was located in the midst of one of Mathura's downtown bazaars. Its main has anyone been there? I think I went there one time. Yeah. Very nice. It's a small temple. And beautiful deity. That'll be described. Keshav Gaudiya Math, because Gaudiya Math had split up into different places and there was no centralized organization anymore. So it was called Keshav G. Gaudiya Math. So his godbrother was insisting, and it was different from Vilas Tirtha Maharaj. So, in main entrance, an arched doorway led into a courtyard, open to the sky through a metal grating above. That's to keep out the monkeys. The architecture was similar to that of the Vamsi Gopal Ji temple. The atmosphere was secluded. As in a monastery, Abai was a familiar, welcomed figure there. He had lived here, written and studied in the library here, editing the Gaudiya Patrika, and he had donated the deity of Lord Chaitanya, who stood on the altar beside the deities of Radha and Krishna. Because even as a Grihastha, Prabhupada was editing the books at the Harmonist magazine. His Guru Maharaj had told him, whatever he writes, print it. He loved his writing. Bhaktisiddhanta loved Prabhupada's writing. Prabhupada wrote one couplet to glorify his Guru Maharaj. Absolute is sentient. Absolute is sentient. Thou hast proved. Impersonal calamity, thou hast moved. Then Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati read this. He said, whatever he writes, you print it. Because he could see that our Prabhupada, he was Abhay Chidaravinda Das, that he understood completely the mission of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. He understood the philosophy completely. So, he had lived here in the Kesavji Gaudiya Math in Mathura, and he edited the Gaudiya Patrika and donated the deity of Lord Chaitanya, who stood on the altar beside the deities of Radha and Krishna. That's the traditional Gaudiya Vaishnava deity setup we have here. Radha and Krishna and then Mahaprabhu. The Mahaprabhu is very small here, and many people don't even notice. I always think that's not a good thing. But in Calcutta, in the ISKCON Calcutta, there's big Mahaprabhu. In Mayapur, there's Radha Madhava and the Astashaki, and you hardly see, you don't even know the Mahaprabhu's there. They don't even have his footprints. I think that I spoke to the deities department. I said, at least you should have the footprints of Mahaprabhu there. Everyone thinks Radha Madhava, and they forget about Mahaprabhu. Anyway, what to do? Gauranga. But his visit during September of 1959 was not an ordinary one. He used to go there many times before. He lived there, but now he was going for a special reason. He entered the Mat, that means the center, the temple, the monastery, dressed in white, Abai Babu. But he would soon be leaving dressed in saffron, a Swami. He used to be called Abai Babu. Abai had been living as renunciate for 9 years. There was no need for him to observe a ceremony or to proclaim himself a sadhu by changing to saffron dress. But it was the parampara system that a man take Tridandi sannyas at the end of his life. He was aware of the cheating sannyasis even in Vrindavan. He had seen so-called sadhu who did not preach but simply spent their days hunting for chapatis. Yes. Some swamis of Vrindavan even indulged illicitly in what they had supposedly come there to reject, sex life. Such persons were making a mockery of sannyas. And there were the caste Goswamis also, who lived like ordinary householders, running temples as a business to support their families and accept honor and donations from the public on the false basis of caste Goswamis, on the false basis of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Renunciation.
No. Caste Goswamis, false basis of birth. The caste Goswamis, they think, just like I've got a surname, then someone else has the same surname. It goes on by birth. So they call themselves Goswami. And the next child is also Goswami. The next child goes by birth, not qualification. Whereas Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Chaturvanyam mayashrisam gunakama vibhags. Gunakama is by quality, not birth. Abai knew of these abuses of sannyas, but he also knew the real purpose of sannyas. Sannyas was for preaching. On the morning of September 17th, 1959, in the 50 by 25 foot deity room on the second floor of the Keshavji Mutt, a group of devotees sat before the deities of Radha Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. The deities were colorfully dressed in royal clothing and silver crowns. Radharani's right hand faced palm forward in benediction for the worshippers. At her side, her left hand held a flower for Krishna. Krishna stood like a dancer, placing his right leg in a casual tiptoe pose before his left, playing his long silver flute, which he held gracefully to his red lips. His long black hair reached down past his shoulders, and the garland of marigolds around his neck reached down to his knees. On his right stood the deity of Lord Chaitanya. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu King. Yeah. Just like this here. Mahaprabhu, sometimes he seems to get lost. Unfortunately. If we get a bigger temple, then if we get a bigger altar, why don't we make a bigger Mahaprabhu? Then people may understand.
We'll bring Gornitai back from Tawaka.
Not Gornitai. You can't have Gornitai on the same altar. You know, on Radha Krishna, you have to have only Mahaprabhu. That's the system. If you have Gornitai, you have to separate altar. That's the system. His right arm upraised, his left arm at his side, his body straight, feet together. He was a soft golden color, and he had large eyes, a well-formed red mouth, and straight black hair down to his shoulders. One level below the deities were pictures of the spiritual masters in disciplic succession. Jagannath Das Babaji, Bhakti Vinod Thakur, Gokishore Das Babaji, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, Bhakti Pragya Keshav Maharaj, Prabhupada's godbrother. Abai sat on a mat of kusha grass beside 90-year-old Sanatan, also to receive sannyas that day. Sitting opposite the two candidates, Narayan Maharaj, Keshav Maharaj's disciple, prepared to conduct the ceremony of mantras and offerings of grains and ghee into the fire. I need a little bit of an explanation here, because some disciples of Narayan Maharaj, they spread the news that like Narayan Maharaj is in Prabhupada's generation. He's like Prabhupada's godbrother. That's not true. You shouldn't listen to them. This is evidence, and this is full evidence. Narayan Maharaj is a disciple of Keshav Pragya Maharaj. He was Prabhupada's godbrother. So in other words, he's my generation. You shouldn't be fooled by false propaganda. Although Narayan Maharaj is an elderly sannyasi and sadhu and everything, still, he's not Prabhupada's godbrother. Narayan Maharaj, Keshav Maharaj's disciple, prepared to conduct the ceremony of sannyas. He was a Ritwik doing the ceremony. And offerings of grains and ghee into the fire. Akinchana Krishnadas Babaji, Abhai's godbrother, known for sweet singing, played mridanga and sang Vaishnav bhajans. Sitting on a raised asan, His Holiness Keshav Maharaj presided. Since there had been no notices or invitations, only the Math's few residents attended. Narayan Maharaj chanted the required mantras and then sat back silently while Keshav Maharaj lectured. And then, to everyone's surprise, Keshav Maharaj asked Abai to speak. Abai, our Prabhupada previously, Abai had not expected this. As he looked around at the gathering of devotees, he understood that the common language was Hindi. Only Keshav Maharaj and a few others spoke English. Yet he knew he must speak in English. I'd love to have been there. We should have had a tape recorder. Someone should take a time machine and go back in time into Akashic records and find out what Prabhupada said. What an amazing speech. After Abhai's speech, each initiate received his sannyas danda, the traditional head-high staff made of 4 bamboo rods, bound together and completely enwrapped in saffron cloth. They were given their sannyas garments, 1 piece of saffron cloth for a dhoti, 1 for a top piece, and 2 strips for underwear. They also received tulsi neck beads and the sannyas mantra. Keshav Maharaj said that Abai would now be known as Bhaktivedanta. Loudly, everybody. Bhaktivedanta. Loudly, please. Come on. Bhaktivedanta. Swami. Swami. Maharaj. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj ki. And that Sanatan would be Muni Maharaj. Muni Maharaj ki. After the ceremony, the 2 new sannyasis posed for a photo, standing on either side of their sannyas guru who sat in a chair. Actually, that's a very historic photo. It was published in one of the Mathura magazines. And maybe you don't know, but after Prabhupada's departure, one of Prabhupada's sons, I don't know which one, he made a case in Bombay to claim all of ISKCON's property as his own. And the devotees, the senior devotees, GBC, Tamal Krishna, and what's his name? Anyway, others, they went there and had to fight the case. It was wasn't an easy case. It was eventually settled out of court. But one of the main things was they produced this newspaper, the picture. The Prabhupada had taken sannyas, evidence from the newspaper at this event. And that was very important for the case. Because in India, if you take sannyas, nobody can claim anymore anything. You're separated from your family, your sons, your children, anything. You're civilly dead. Civilly dead. No one can say anything anymore. And maybe in the West it's different, but in India you're civilly dead. So in the end, they had to show that picture. And it really helped to win the case. It wasn't the final thing, but it really helped. So anyhow, that was an important point. Took a photograph. Keshav Maharaj didn't impose any strictures on Abai. He simply encouraged him to go on preaching. Yet Abai knew that to become A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami did not mean merely that he was giving up family, home comforts and business. That he had done 5 years ago. That was the tea or me incident. Changing from white cloth to saffron cloth, from Abai Babu to Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, had a special significance. It was a mandate he had required, the irrevocable commitment. Now it was only a matter of time before Bhaktivedanta Swami would travel to the West as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had predicted. No. It's a little dignified word. Beginning with O. Not ordered, but another version of ordered. Ordained. As Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had ordained. This was Bhaktivedanta Swami's realization of his new sannyas status. The Gaudiya Patrika's account of the sannyas initiation included a biographical sketch of Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj, listing the major events of his life. The article concluded, seeing his enthusiasm and ability to write articles in Hindi, English and Bengali, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj gave him the instruction to take Tridandi sannyas. For nearly 1 year, he had been ready to accept sannyas. In the month of Bhadra, on the day on which Vishwarup accepted sannyas, Bhaktivedanta Swami at the Sri Keshavji Gaudiya Math accepted sannyas from the founder of the Vedanta Samiti, Bhakti Pragyana Keshav Maharaj. Seeing him accept his ashram of renunciation, seeing his pastime for accepting the renounced order of life, we have attained great affection and enthusiasm. Srila Prabhupada ki. Shri Satsarup Das Goswami Maharaj ki. So any questions, please? There was a question? What was your question, bro? Maharaj has one. Oh, Maharaj, you like to say something?
That's more important.
Huh?
More importantly, yes.
Okay.
I just had a question about how Srila Prabhupada went and then started his own mission. It seems it's not his own mission. It's continuing the order of the spiritual master, but a new organization. You know, it just seems why was that the case that he did that?
Because Bhaktivilas Tirtha Maharaj, according to Abhay Srinaravinda Das Adhikari's understanding, was not properly following the order of his Guru Maharaj Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And so he had to take the law into his own hands. He could see that his Guru Maharaj's mission was, they were just fighting, illegally fighting amongst themselves. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati had told his disciples to form a governing body commission and manage the society cooperatively. Prabhupada explains this in Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a purport. But they disobeyed that order. And they tried to follow the old system the acharya, there should be an acharya of each mat, like a guru, each guru would have his own mat. So then there was a struggle, who would be the guru? Not that they managed to, would manage to go to the Chaitanya mat cooperatively with a committee, a corporate management. So it was difficult for Prabhupada's godbrothers to do that. They're so conditioned to the system. So it didn't work. And actually Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati hadn't trained them. When Prabhupada set up ISKCON, he formed the GBC, he told us what to do, have meetings and this. Sometimes he disbanded the GBC and chastised us. And then he trained the GBC, and he made it clear that this was the management. But Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati hadn't done that, although he wanted it, and he said it, he wanted that, but they couldn't follow. So Prabhupada was not encouraged by Bhakti Vilas Tirtha Maharaj's attitude and his facilities for preaching in the West. Because actually, of course, you remember, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati and Radha Kund had spoken confidentially to Abai when they were walking together. There's a beautiful picture in the Prabhupada Leelamrita. He said, Agosh Valvi. He said, there will be fire. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati could see that his godbrothers were going to fight about the property. Who's going to have each room? Who's going to have that room? And they wouldn't cooperate. They were too neophyte. So Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati told him confidentially, if ever you get money, print books. If ever you get money, print books. So this was, when Prabhupada wrote to Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Maharaj, he was interested in taking sannyas. He was also interested in printing books. And you could see that from the letters of Bhaktivedanta Tirtha Maharaj representing the Chaitanya Mat, that was not their priority. They had no money. They were going to print, other books. They weren't going to print Prabhupada's books. So, there was no alternative actually in Prabhupada's mind. What to do? I have to take sannyas. My Guru Maharaj wants me to take sannyas. My godbrothers are not supporting me. And he went to them. That's Prabhupada's humility. He went to them. He gave them the chance. I want to go to the West. I want to print books. Please help me. But he didn't want to do it. So he had no recourse. And his godbrother, Bhakti Pragyakesha Maharaj, he was willing. He said, no, you must take sanya. You must take sanya. He encouraged him. So he did it. So that's how So he gave up the institution to form a better institution. That was institution should follow the order of the spiritual master. If the institution doesn't follow the order of the group Parampara, Prabhupada gave an example. It could be given up. It could be given up. So if we see that ISKCON deviates from the order of Prabhupada, then what can we do? You see? And the institution is not the be-all and end-all. The position and the legalities and everything. The main thing is the Guru Parampara should continue somehow or other. The essence of the Guru Parampara is to spread Krishna consciousness, Lord Chaitanya's movement. So Prabhupada knew this and he felt this in his heart. So he knew he had to go it alone. He had to go it alone. Not that I'm suggesting we should go it alone, because ISKCON's still alive and kicking. Although there may be discrepancies in the institution or our management, you know. Everyone's doing their best. So there's no reason to give up ISKCON and go outside. We should cooperate and make ISKCON successful, preaching mission more and more. That's the way I see it. You know, I don't want to go it alone. What could we do alone? ISKCON's a wonderful facility, so many temples and, you know, centers and devotees. So it's ideal for preaching. But Prabhupada had that responsibility. He became the founder Acharya. He became the founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And he stuck to that. And on the letterhead, everything, on every center it said founder Acharya. Prabhupada had to start his own mission, because the other had become, in Prabhupada's words, asara, become useless. Asara, become useless. They're just fighting amongst themselves. So we're not doing that, although some of my godbrothers have gone outside. Unfortunately, they couldn't cooperate with the GBC. Even that was Prabhupada's order. Prabhupada said to my godbrother, Shiradaksai Vishnu, he took sannyas. He said, if you can't cooperate with the GBC, then go on preaching at least. Form your own society. So Prabhupada wanted the preaching to go on, even if there wasn't the same institution. Shiradaksai Vishnu and others, Sringha Maharaj, Triparaya Maharaj and others, they started their own institution because they couldn't cooperate with the GBC. It's unfortunate, but what to do? But at least the preaching has to go on. That's the main thing. Yeah, any more comments or questions, Maha?
Well, I don't have anything special to say other than that's how I would also describe the answer to Gopal Champa's question.
Yeah.
Basically,
Okay, take the mic.
given up the idea of preaching, at least in the Western world. In fact, Gaudiya Math was convinced that it was impossible to spread Christian consciousness outside of India. And they sandbagged everything that, as we were just hearing, they sandbagged everything was suggested that he would go to America. That was a direct order of Spirit, and that's what they sandbagged, saying that, you just stay here in the Maha. And what was the goal of the Maha? The Maha was just to perpetuate itself, basically. They would pay the rent. And this was right after those huge legal wars that tore the apart. Whole war between the Chaitanya Maha and the so-called Acharya. There was one devotee who was a sannyasi that several of the members of the Gaudiya Math felt should have been the Math Acharya. And they pushed it forward. But this Bhaktivilas Tirtha Swami was against it, and so he fought it in the courts. And all the while he'd been putting money away from Gaudiya Math income to fight this battle. He knew it was coming. And he encouraged his sons to become lawyers so he wouldn't have to pay them. And they fought this battle for years and years and years, and it wrecked the financial standing of the Gaudiya Math. So they didn't have any money for anything. And they were really kind of basically just targeting existence. They did some little preaching in there. They had no sense of a global mission. It was what? All the way back to Jiva Swami, as I was talking about yesterday, this Vishnu travel to the West and teach meat-eaters how to become Vaishnavas. It seemed impossible, you know. But as Prabhupada said, impossible is a word in the fool's dictionary. So he did it anyways, and he came over. And even after Prabhupada came to the United States, he still corresponded with these various Gaudiya Math leaders. There was about 2 or 3 major ones and some minor ones. The Gaudiya Math didn't break into 2 pieces. It broke into about 5 or 6 pieces, and later on even more than that. And each Math is a law in itself. You know, that was what Prabhupada didn't want to have happen in his life. That each major leader would become a Math in himself. And there would be no overall ISKCON. There would just be these individual Maths, each with their own idea, with their own acharya, with their own resources, not sharing any kind of resources. That was what the idea was of the GBC. But the Gaudiya Math immediately rejected that, basically. Rather than implement that, they decided to try it. They went to this battle between this one sannyasi, who eventually fell down, and then this, Bhakti-Vilas Tirtha, who was, the one who had all the money. He was the manager. He had been a very successful manager for some kind of quasi-spiritual organization before, and he was what made the Gaudiya Math financially solid. So he was kind of at the grassroots level of money coming and going. So he eventually won the biggest piece of the Gaudiya Math, which was the Chaitanya Math. And so he was able to substantiate that and hold it together, whereas the other ones became like Keshava's Math, smaller, and the one with the sannyasi completely sort of fizzled out altogether. These other different other pieces breaking off. Each one eventually kind of broke off. So because he couldn't work together with them, and because they were not here for preaching, and because even when he asked them that they could manage the new temple that he would build in America, he suggested that they finance the temple. He had a place picked out in Manhattan, on 7th Avenue or something like that. I forget what the place was, somewhere. And he approached them that they could, help him finance it, but they had no interest, not even slightly, in doing that. So eventually Prabhupada just discovered that he should just leave them behind, because they were at war with one another. They were not interested in preaching. They had no vision for printing books or getting across in the Western world. And so there was nothing they would offer. As a matter of fact, even sometimes they tried to hamper Prabhupada's efforts. And so eventually he decided he needed to create a separate organization and preach in the West and do what his spiritual master and Bhakti-Vinod Thakur, the whole Vishnu Vaishnava Raja Sabha idea all the way back to the Swami. He would implement it, whereas they weren't interested in doing that. So he became something. Bhakti-Siddhanta had presaged it because, at one point they had asked, why doesn't the Vaibhavu become a part of the Gaudiya Math? And Bhakti-Siddhanta said, you don't have to recommend him. In time he will do everything. I have bigger things. So he already knew that this was kind of what was going to happen. And, as Maha Vishnu Swami was speaking, that he knew there would be fire in the jaw. He knew that soon the neophyte nature, that there would just be infighting and a effort to try to
Thank you, Maharaj. Nine. There's something here. I don't know if your owner has time. But there won't be any prasadam left. But there's something by Mula Prakriti Maharaj. Mula Prakriti wrote a book with more details. Okay, I better leave it now. Any more questions? Srila Prabhupada ki. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.